Hi, family. I can't be here and not be charged. So, Rob, it's awesome. Bill, I see so many familiar faces. It's awesome to see you guys back. Again, tonight, I apologize. I'm not on top form. I've been ill for quite a while. I can't hear really well. So if I'm shouting at you and I'm not supposed to be, bear with me. Bear with me, okay? And Bill, if you need to speak, you're going to have to like wave or something because I might not hear you coming through. So we're going to take it as it comes tonight. But here's the really cool part. I'm so excited. We're going to talk about Jim. We've got 4 stories that we're going to launch into. We are in More About Alcoholism. And that is chapter 3. And we're on page 35 on the 3rd paragraph. All right. The format of this meeting is Bill and I read, I share a bit. I give a bit of the nerdy side of things, what the words mean, what we think Bill meant, because, you know, we're all great friends of him. And then Bill Swan will jump in with some seriously anointed, like mind-blowing stuff, right? So just bear with us. And then, yeah, after this, we hope to hear back from everyone. We really, really encourage to hear back from you tonight. All right. Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35, and in a few years he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. So there's a whole bunch of descriptions that fit us when we're playing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? We're successful, we're super friendly, everybody loves us, great. I don't know if you played that game, but I played the game of two personalities. I had my hardcore drinking and using that nobody knew about. It was underground and far away from family and friends and colleagues. And then I had this life that I showed everybody at work, at the family events, you know, with the husband, with the kids. I had these 2 lives, very distinct lives, and 2 very distinct personalities for both. And yes, Jim. So I just want us to look at a couple of things. Let's try and imagine we're going to get to learn to know Jim now. So he's inherited an automobile agency. This is not something that he got. He got this from somebody. In the 1930s, I suppose, and it's an old idea, but I'm going to go there. Men like to make their own money, right? So Jim has been handed this. I think there's a little bit of resentment brewing there for the family. The dad, the fact that it's not him with the money. All right, let's go. He had a commendable World War record. That's from World War I. So he's imagined himself a hero. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's intelligent. These are examples. Let's look at ourselves and see what examples we can give of ourselves. Tick, yes, tick, tick, tick. I love this. He's normal, except for a nervous disposition. That shake that we have, like we just don't fit in our skin. We don't feel our feet. When we're around people, there's just that little vibration. It's not necessarily from the drinking. I always thought it was. But it was after I stopped drinking, I realized I still had a nervous disposition. Why? Because I'm driven by fear, driven by resentment, self-pity, 400 forms of weirdness, and it talks about it a little later. He did no drinking until he was 35. But when he started, he became so violent that he had to be committed. Does that not talk about the progressive nature of this disease? Even though he wasn't a drinking alcoholic, he was still a thinking alcoholic. He still had the alcoholic mind. We're going to find out that he is a real alcoholic just like us. So whether he started drinking or not, the disease was still progressive in him. So when he started drinking, it was as if he'd been drinking since the age of 15. So the story of Jim is that we can't do some of the work and get all the promises. We need to work the whole AA program, because you'll see now he makes a beginning and that's it. Another note I want to make here, he had no drinking until the age of 35, but when he started, he became so violent when intoxicated. What does that speak of? That speaks of the allergy. Not just one, 1,000, right? And he becomes dangerously antisocial. We go on to read. We told him what we knew of alcoholism, which is step one, the malady, the allergy, the obsession, and the answer we had found, which is step two. All we got to do is just come to believe. We don't have to believe. We don't have to go find God. We just have to just say maybe. Okay, that's the solution. He made a beginning. That is step 1, 2, and 3. How do I know that? Let's go look at page 63. Page 63, the fourth, it says there that we had to have God's help. So we realize we have a problem. We realize there's a solution. It's God, it's not us. And then we give our lives over. We take that third step decision. Now look what happens. He's made a beginning, only a beginning. His family is reassembled. He begins work for the business that he used to own. Oof, there's that resentment, right? And what's a resentment for an alcoholic? It's a number one offender. Apparently, it kills, because there's 5 death threats in the paragraph we're going to find later. There's no messing around with resentments in alcoholics. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. Steps 4 through to 9. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. But we have no defense against that black spot, remember? We know where it's going to end up, but it disappears the minute that obsession takes over. Moreover, he would lose his family, for whom he had a deep affection. Why do you think Bill wrote that sentence? Because there's 2 things that he speaks of in this book. He says that we are beyond human aid, the A, B's, and C's on page 60. The 3 pertinent ideas. B, that no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. So even though he had this deep affection for his family and his beautiful wife, it wasn't enough. And I can imagine how they have begged him, because it speaks of frothy emotional appeal in the doctor's opinion. Those begging kids and wives, it's not enough. It doesn't help, because we're beyond human aid. And then what happens? He got drunk again, because he has the obsessive mind that'll compel him to pick up a drink, whether or not if you could have hooked him up to a lie detector test this morning when the kids were begging him and the wife was begging him, saying, I'm going to leave you. And he's going, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. If you'd hooked him up to a lie detector test, Jim wasn't lying, guys. We asked him, so now I like making up little like visuals of what happened here. So I imagine these guys are at the meeting. They've got a meeting, and Jim has come in straggling, broken, dirty, clothes hanging off him. He's lost weight. He's desperate. He's drowning. And he admits that he's an alcoholic. He takes the 3rd step. Apparently those days you had to take it on your knees in front of some men, and then you could go to the meeting. And he does this a couple of times, because what I can gather here, he's coming back and then he goes out again. He comes back, and now, like the 4th or 5th time he walks in, and they're like, okay, dude, we're done. Like, this is like, where's, because the book talks about it in working with others. There is a waste of time with some people who just don't have that desperation of a drowning man. But now he comes in and they sit him down and they say, Jim, what's the story, brother. Why do you think you keep drinking? What happened with the last drink? And this is where it gets, Bill, I see you've unmuted. Please talk. I need to go get.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say. I just got tired of you talking about this guy. I didn't know him as well as you, so I was envious. You know, it's interesting. I'm sitting here and Rob was so kind again to go into the chat and put up who this guy was. So intuitively, I thought Fitz Mayo's, our Southern friend, is kept in the big book in perpetuity because it talks about his story was so significant, some of it ought to be told now. He's talked about in the doctor's opinion, he's talked about in the book, and then he has his story in the back of the book. I just so happen to have a signed copy, one of the first one that came off the press by Bill Wilson. He gave it to me personally, of the first edition. We go to a lot of these big book meetings and people try and give us an opinion or a theory as to what was going on, and we have the story right in front of us. At the risk of getting banned from this group, which wouldn't be a bad thing because then I could get something accomplished on Mondays, I make a group conscious motion that we read this guy's story and know exactly what happened. I didn't hear anyone vote against it. In other words, Nadia, we're going to study the book. And if you go to any of these compendiums, they're all going to have an idea that Jim had a resentment on Tuesday. That's why he didn't go to work on Monday. And I'm thinking, I was in the car business. Sometimes people have Monday off. That may have been the only reason that they talked about on Tuesday. But give an alcoholic an idea and a bunch of filibustering, and we'll take advantage of it. Like I said, I have a copy, and I'm sure Rob does. Does anyone want to hear about what this guy that they're talking about, Jim, actually happened to him rather than theorize about it? We can conclude and talk about that. We can conclude the story in the book, provided we don't inject any more opinion, because we might be embarrassed next week if we read the story and find out we were wrong. Maybe we won't do it today, because this narrative about this guy contains many powerful messages for us. But before we go telling about what we think happened, we can read his story and know for sure. And then guess what, Nadja? We will be the most politically correct big book compendium on the platform. I assure you of that. You know, because what we're saying is, well, we know what he was thinking. Here, maybe the reason he became so violent from drinking was because he had a World War reputation, which means he might have seen combat. He might have seen a bunch of people killed or have people die in his arms. I don't know. But when my sponsor was a Vietnam vet, there were experiences he had, memories he had that I would never have, which put him in a position where things that were not acceptable in what we call normal society became a way of life for him over there fighting for survival in the jungles of Vietnam for 6 years. You follow what I'm saying? Who knows why he became so violent? Maybe it wasn't excessive alcohol. Maybe it was the rage and the fear and the memories and the torment that lived inside of him. Now, when I pause and take a breath, that's time for you to tell me what the hell you're thinking.
I am thinking of something, and we made reference to it, Nana. And I want to go there because, Bill, you might be right. I am theorizing and I'm pretending as if like I know him, but for teaching purposes, I want to highlight those factors that the doctor speaks about in the doctor's opinion. But I also want to go to what you've just spoken of. Page 62, the second paragraph. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, okay? So we come in here, we think it's drinking, but now look here. This is what Bill was talking about. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. So yes, maybe it wasn't the allergy that made him violent. Maybe it's the fact that he's driven by these 400 forms of weirdness. And these are all characteristics of an alcoholic of the real type. And I don't know if anybody else has done this. I'm sure you have, but I'm spending some time just picking out through these pages the characteristics of a real alcoholic. Dangerously antisocial, driven, selfish, self-centered. Restless, irritable, discontent. All right, back we go, page 36. So now we remember Jim is telling these guys what had happened just before he picked up this last spree of his. What happened? So here's his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated. Highlight that, put a circle around it, because that's one of the diseases that we have as alcoholics without alcohol in our body. This is that thing that Bill spoke about last week. We can't stand being sober. Restless, irritable, discontent. So we're going to look for those three here. Irritable, yes, tick. That he had to be a salesman for a concern that he once owned. I can tell you now that that was a resentment. So we've got irritable, we've got a resentment. We're speculating whether he came to work on Tuesday because he had Monday off. Maybe he was hungover. I don't know. Then I decided, remember, whenever we look at a thinking word, we're going to highlight it, put sparkle gel pens around it, because it's that thinking. This disease centers in our mind. Then I decided, there's no calling a sponsor, there's no step 10 process there, there's nothing. He decides that he's going to drive into the country. So he has words with his boss, jumps into a car, and off he goes. Do you know what's happening? The obsession is kicking in here. He's got a mind that's going to compel him to drink. So his mind has told him it's a good idea to leave the floor. You've had words with your boss. You haven't rocked up work on Monday. Leave. Leave. And where does he go? Let's look. He decided to drive into the country and see one of his prospects for a car. That looks to me like a whole lot of restlessness going on. So tick, restless. On the way, I felt hungry. So I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. There's that thinking thing again. He got there and he's like, I'm not going to have a drink. I see the bar, but I'm not going to have a drink. The problem is he's not going to have a drink, but he's thinking about not drinking. That's the danger zone. I just thought, there we go again, there's another thinking word. I just thought I would get a sandwich. Here's another thinking word. I also had the notion that I might, he's full flight from reality, right? That's another characteristic of us alcoholics. We got these fantastic ideas. He might find a customer here, just like he'll buy a car. He'll buy this car from him. Which was familiar, for I'd been going to it for years. I'd eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Here we go. Still no thought of drinking. Yeah, Jim, you're not sitting there thinking, maybe I should buy a drink, maybe I should have a beer, maybe I should have a whiskey with some milk, and not yet. But you are sitting down thinking, hey, look at me. I'm at a bar and I'm not buying a drink. You have an obsessive mind, buddy. Thinking about not drinking, you're off to the races without even putting alcohol to your lips. Guess what? So still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and a glass of milk. Is that not typical alcoholic behavior? We ain't going to have one. We're going to have two. And here we go. Squiggly writing. This is super important. And this is it. This is the thinking. Suddenly, because that's the nature within the thought comes, suddenly, and he's off guard. The thought crossed my mind. Oh dear. He's been hijacked. It's done. It's tickets. That if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it wouldn't hurt me on a full stomach. How many of us have said that? Like if I just eat half a block of cheese or maybe 2 McDonald's and then go out drinking, I'll be able to drink much longer tonight and not end up puking on the floor of my boyfriend's house. So he's like, I've had 2 sandwiches, 2 glasses of milk. I'll be fine. I've got a full stomach. It's not going to hurt me. Delusional. I love this. I love the story. It's great. I ordered a whiskey and I poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed that I was not being any too smart. We know when we sit down and we order that first drink, we know, but we push it so far away, we just don't listen to it. It's just shut up, shut up, shut up. I vaguely sensed, because that is the nature within that our right course of action comes in a vague manner, very quickly, very fleetingly, easy to be ignored. But felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and I poured it into more milk. There you are. The allergy has kicked in. We cannot have one. And that didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Suddenly, I just want to look at that top line. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind. I said something a little earlier, but let's go. I like referencing in the book because otherwise it's a whole bunch of Nadia just saying stuff. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind. That mental defense, that no defense that we're talking about. Where does it talk about? It says, speaks about it on page 24, second paragraph. Squiggly writing, in the middle of that squiggly writing. We are unable at certain times, sitting in a pub, we're actually there to do business. That's what he's told himself. He's hungry. That's what he's told himself. At those certain times, we're unable to bring into our consciousness. He's been in and out of the rooms. He's made a decision. He's made a beginning. He knows he's an alcoholic. He gets that. He relates to the guys. He's been in the meetings. He's heard them share. To bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the begging of the pleading of his wives and his kids, his wife and his kids, the memory and suffering of humiliation of even a month or a week ago. We are without defense against that first drink. Back on page 36. Last chapter, last paragraph. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, and to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. Let's stop. Two situations. You're sitting with the sponsee, ask them this question. Change this into the statement into a question. Sponsee, is that your experience? Do you know what intense mental suffering feels like from drinking? Waking up at 5 a.m. and you can't open your eyes because you don't know where you are. You don't know where your car keys are. You don't know where your phone is. You don't know who's next to you. Walking around the whole day, you don't know what you did last night. You can't remember. You're too scared to look at the WhatsApps because there's people telling you what you said and did last night and where you went. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish, there it is, there's another thinking word, the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. When I heard step 2 read to me, that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity, I was like, that implies that I'm insane. Early days when my sponsor went through chapter how it works with me, and I did not like the notion that I was insane, because I wasn't insane. I was just a really bad person. But when I read Jim's story, and we're going to go on to 3 other stories now, I got to see that there's some insanity here. And I get to see a whole lot of it later. And the worst part is I get to see it even when I don't have alcohol in my vicinity, in my proximity, even when I'm sober, even when I'm in this program, doing the deal, praying, meditating, living in my disciplines, sponsoring like a monster, doing book studies like they're coming out of my ears. And I still am insane.
And now I'm going to jump in, mate.
Thank you.
You can hear me? So going back to the first paragraph, and I had this thought before, and I'm sure that I voiced it. It says he came in contact with us after leaving the asylum. So he shows up at A&A. I'm going back to page 35. I'm on jet lag. I'm on Ohio time now. I'm not in South Africa. It's only noon, 12:30 here. We told him what we knew of alcoholism. He made a beginning, as you said. All went well for a time. Now pay attention to this. He began to work for a concern he lost through drinking, which means he got his job back. I don't care who owned it. Some alcoholics are relieved when the responsibility that they can't live up to are handed to someone else. I'm pissed off when they succeed at something I couldn't, but sometimes there's great relief. Some things are handed to us that are overwhelming beyond our ability to handle them. But his family was reassembled. So I look at Alcoholics Anonymous. What happens is one of our members, and I won't say him by name because we're on the recording, but he's celebrating an anniversary today. Wife told him, if you don't quit drinking, I'm going to leave you. That's what happened with Jim. In his story, it talks about his wife met with a lawyer to file for divorce. Unemployed, in a psych ward, with the threat of on the verge of divorce. And what happens is the consequences of his last drunk get remedied. He's back together with his family and he's got his job back. Most people come to Alcoholics Anonymous as a result of the consequences of their drinking, thinking that their problem is getting off of probation, getting their job back, satisfying some judge's or some wife's order. And when they accomplish what they came for, they got out of Alcoholics Anonymous exactly what they came for. I got my wife back. I don't need to attend those meetings. Why would I go any further? Problem solved. And this is not a consequential illness, nor a remedy to the consequence solution. But sometimes we mistake it like that. I'm wondering, and I was looking for it, and I don't know if Rob knows, I wonder when he first began dealing with AA, because his permanent sobriety date wasn't until June 6th of 1938. They had experience with him. I don't know how much experience, because they met with him each time. Is that correct? Is that what the reading says? They met with him more than once. Every time I asked got handed to me, I came to A&A for you guys to solve my problem. And as soon as the problem that I thought I had was solved, thank you, I've had enough, see you, right? And it ran, the wind stopped blowing. And what happens is I go back to the abyss. The story explains that he's out at a roadside place looking for a customer to buy a car. Now, don't you think you'd have to have a car to sell the customer? He might want to come to the dealership. But anyhow, nonetheless, he's been to a roadside place that he successfully had lunch in without drinking many times in the past few months or year. He's often made an acquaintance there that came back and bought a car. But what he doesn't realize is he's under the influence of alcohol and doesn't know it. I know when the obsession to drink is upon me, because the only thing that's causing me angst is I can't get to the first drink quick enough to satisfy the obsession. But this guy's being led like a sheep to the slaughter. He's at a roadside place thinking there's nothing wrong with that. He's in a place where alcohol is served, and suddenly the thought crosses his mind that if I just have me a gin milkshake or whatever the hell he was drinking, it couldn't hurt me because it's going to coat my stomach. It'll protect the alcohol from turning into this poison that always makes me crazy. And the experiment went so well, he didn't realize, even though he learned about alcoholism, he didn't realize that that little bit of whiskey and that milk or milkshake ignited the phenomenon of craving. He thought it was his idea to have another one and then another one ad nauseum. So he knew all he needed to know about alcoholism. Self-knowledge would fix it, the book says in another chapter, maybe this one, but somewhere else. Self-knowledge is not sufficient to overcome alcoholism. We talked about how Bill used the experience of step one for 3 hours with a guy he met on a trolley car. And then because it was Armistice Day and the alcohol was free, he drank it, and the guy looked at him like he was an idiot. He said, "Mister, after all you've told me that alcohol has done to ruin in your life, asylums, loss of home, loss of family, loss of job, and yet you took a drink, you must be crazy." Bill said, "I'm insane." Bravo posts that in a minute. I'm giving him something to do. But let's look at the fact that if you're coming to AA to get back what you lost, you might get everything back, including a bad case of alcoholism. Good to see you here, Rabbi.
Might get a good dose of alcoholism. Wouldn't that be a real treat? Yeah, Fred is also another story about self-knowledge. Page 37. We stopped at the word insanity. Thanks, Bill. Thank you for that. I'm going to read it again. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight, there's that thinking, those thinking terms again, be called anything else? You may think this is an extreme case. To us, it is not far-fetched. For this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. Let's stop. Have I had this experience? Swansea, have you had this experience? Is this your experience? We've got to make this book work for them. We've got to make this book tell their story. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there has always the curious mental phenomena that parallel with our sound reasoning. There inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning, best thinking, failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. So this is not me, this is plagiarism, what I'm about to do, but there's a little, again, like let's get a little image here. So there's Nadia and an insane idea, and there's a gun, the starting gun, and we go, and we're racing, and the gun goes off, and Nadia and the insane idea, and I'm trying to outrun this insane idea. Next time it's going to be different. Next time it's not going to end up in me sleeping with somebody else's husband. Next time it's not going to end up with me driving into my best friend. Next time it's not going to end up with me being carried out of a pub or a club. Next time it's going to be different. And insane ideas behind me. And the next thing, insane idea wins and crosses the finishing line before I do. Next day, we would ask ourselves, in all earnestness and sincerity, how could it have happened? This is an image that is burned into my mind. I have had this 1,000 times in my life. I've had many moments of incomprehensible demoralization, but my repeat offender is waking up on a toilet floor, ice cold tiles, face smushed up against a toilet, and here I am, back there again. How? Why am I back at this toilet again, dry heaving like a buffalo? We see your hand up, Joseph. At the end of the meeting, we jump in and ask questions. So glad you're here with us tonight. In some circumstances, we've gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. There's the whole bang shoot. There's everybody. There's all the offenders: restless, irritable, discontent, resentment, delusion, self-seeking, selfishness, self-centered. There they are. There's the crew that runs the show. There's the crew that gets us to lose to the insane idea. But even in this type of beginning, we are obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always had happened. We now see that when we begin to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences may be.
Okay, two things. I'll slow down a little bit. Paul told me I sounded hysterical in my last rant, so the meeting will just go over, but I'll talk slow in language I don't understand. So they use that word phenomenon again, mental phenomenon, which means it can't be explained. And it says, but there always was the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning. So I have a reasoning that's running linear, if you will, and then an insane idea just underneath it that tends to trump my sound reasoning every time. There inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning, our sanity, our ability to think straight fails to hold us in check, and the insane idea, the liar in my head, like Cameron says, always wins the argument. Next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. So I go back to chapter 2, page 24. I'm doing Nadja's job today. She's under the weather. Normally, she's the book jumper. It talks about what we say to ourselves after we've made a commitment to not drink because we admit that it is harmful or injurious. We know that. We agree to not drink. And then we go and say, it won't burn me this time. So here's how. How did I ever get started again? Oh, well, I might as well finish the job now. If one drink breaks the contract, then 50 breaks it just the same. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. And then it tells us this, and it's reiterating it here, very important. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, and I know the tendency is the phenomenon of craving, but you can add self-centeredness, fear-driven, all the other things that this book describes that is wrong with us in the form of a extreme example of the human condition in the negative aspect. When this sort of thinking is fully established, we have probably placed ourselves beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go crazy. Tells us it's strong. And this stark fact and ugly facts, stark and ugly facts, have been legions of alcoholics throughout history. Here's where they changed the proximity of this book to how personal it was to them. It says there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. In the first edition, it says there would have been 100 more because they knew that personally they had been spared from alcoholism's final blow by the hand of God. But in the second edition and then from on, because the vast number of the fellowship has grown, now they say thousands, they might boast millions in the fifth edition, I don't know. But could you imagine? There's 17 of us on here today, say we were writing this book and we're going to send it out to the world. We could say, but for the grace of God, there would have been 17 more convincing demonstrations. It's a powerful statement, and sometimes we lose touch with it because the fellowship is so in place, because the fellowship is so vast, because meetings are on every corner and every computer. But it wasn't like that when they were writing the book, and they knew it. They knew it was the grace of God. So I just wanted to reiterate that and fill in the blanks, give me a little time to talk because I love to hear myself.
Thank you so much for jumping in there. Beyond human aid. And yeah, which only a spiritual experience will solve. That's the That's the caveat here, just bye. And also, we lay these spiritual tools at your feet. It's a program of action. You've got to bend down and pick them up. You've got to bend down and pick them up and do some stuff. Page 37. Yeah, we're going to go into our second story, Jaywalker. This is a story of a guy that does crazy things for fun. Crazy, deadly things for fun. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with the passion, say, for jaywalking. Right, for those who don't know, or maybe you use a different term in your country, there's a zebra crossing for pedestrians to cross from one side to the other in traffic flowing. But a jaywalker doesn't use a zebra crossing. A jaywalker will jump across traffic, over solid lines, over boundaries. In South Africa, we actually have to build, because jaywalking is a huge thing in South Africa, between our townships specifically, they take shortcuts. We have to build like proper concrete walls between the townships over the big freeways, the big 4-lane freeways, 5-lane, 6-lane freeways. These guys just bolt over those things. It is unbelievable to watch. And I have yet to take a trip on one of those 5-lane carriageways and not see a body bag in an ambulance. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Why can't you just drink like a normal person? Why don't you just drink like a lady? You've got such a good man. What's your problem? Why do you have to like always be the last one to leave the party? Nadia, you've become a mom. Like this is not, moms don't do this kind of stuff. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. But presently, he is hit again, and this time has a fractured skull. Ends up in hospital with a drip in his arm from an OD, first one. Maybe has a scuff with the police. Bust him outside the dealer's house. I don't know, just a little bit of rubbing shoulders with the wrong side of this thing. Within a week, after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good. There's the good old Elkie anthem. Never, ever again. I'm done. I'm done. I'm through. I'm done. I promise you I'm done. But in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. I'll just drink on weekends. I won't go drinking when I play golf. I'll drink white wine in the summer. I'll drink red wine in the winter. I'll just stop hanging out with those guys. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. There it is. I don't know how many, I should actually do a little like a little tally here. Tally how many times the word I made a decision, I sat down, like how many times self-manifest in our thinking and how many times the word thinking and all the thinking terms. I think I'm going to do a little score sheet going forward. But we're walking into the solution pretty soon. He shuts himself in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? Bill was talking about the liar nana, the insane idea that wins out. We believe that insidious lie that we can drink like other people. It will be different next time. It'll be different next time. Maybe if I just jump over the yellow lines, maybe I skip over the island. Maybe I don't do the highways. Maybe I just do the back alleys. And we'll chase that notion to the gates of insanity or death. Thanks, Rob. A trolley car's a tram. Yeah. In those days, they had like, I think, like, someone, I think it was Paul, someone posted like holiday photos the other day, and I saw that, I think in Canada, you guys still have trams somewhere around there. Am I right? Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. So these things are still on the go. In South Africa, they're all in the museums. But anyway, nonetheless, I digress.
That's interesting that Rob brought up the point in the original intent was kleptomania, because before alcoholism was called alcoholism, it was called dipsomania. So it's a mania for something, it's an insanity, and that's what mania means, something that's driven. I think about this paragraph that you said, such a man, in the doctor's opinion, he said these men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. Now, I know that Dr. Silkworth is talking about the physical allergy, but that description fits here, the jaywalker. He's drinking to overcome an insatiable appetite that exists before he drinks, beyond his mental control. And Dr. Bob talks about having a craving, which we all know that the only thing that produces the phenomenon of craving for alcohol is alcohol. However, this thought he can't get out of his mind. He takes the first drink. That's what Dr. Silkworth's alluding to. Some people are drinking to overcome a craving beyond their ability to stop with their mind what they've already started with their body. But it kind of brings it all together with what Dr. Bob talks about, the craving that was in his mind. We know it was an obsession, but had it really manifested to the point of obsession, Dr. Bob would have probably drank, but it was the idea in the mind that always leads back to the first drink. Two different words, I understand it. I'm not confused about the difference between phenomenon of craving and obsession of the mind. But it kind of makes sense when it's talking about the insane idea always winning out. And there were times where I was so obsessed that the only thing that could satisfy the obsession was the first one, which I already knew was going to set the craving. There were sometimes I'd be so physiological high before I got the first one in me. I knew it wasn't going to be a good run, but I had to satisfy what was going on inside of my mind with the first one at all costs. So I fit this description real accurately. I'm the trolley car kind of guy.
You're the jaywalker and I'm Fred. I think we should change this show to the Fred and the jaywalker. Thanks, Bill. I think we're going to wrap it up there. We're on the hour and we're about to dig a little bit deeper into the jaywalker. So we can stop recording. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.